Level 1. The copyist. You're 24, and you don't think of yourself as a forger. That's the first thing to understand. You think of yourself as a student who pays rent. Specifically, you paint reproductions for a man named Hollis, who runs 2 framing galleries downtown and wears a watch worth more than your tuition. Hollis explained the job in a diner booth over cold fries with the casual tone of someone describing freelance design. You copy paintings, minor works, dead artists, nothing famous. You match the brushwork, the palette, the period, never anything a museum would recognize. You sign nothing. You are, for all visible purposes, a young artist practicing technique. The reason the canvases are always early 20th century is something Hollis didn't explain and you didn't ask about. You looked it up later. Anything before 1923 sits in a gray zone of expired records and lost provenance. Newer than that, and the paper trail catches you. Older, and the science exposes you. You are the human equivalent of a photocopier set to a specific decade, producing objects that slide into the market without flagging anything. Your pay is $300 per canvas cash. Obviously, you do this 2 or 3 times a month. You still work your actual job at an art supply store because Hollis said, keep your life exactly the same. Don't spend more. Don't change anything. Be ordinary. The advice sounds like something a professor would say, and you follow it because Hollis has the quiet authority of someone who has thought further ahead than you. The first month is uneventful. You produce 4 small landscapes in the manner of a forgotten regional painter. You age the canvas with tea and sun. You stretch them on period frames Hollis supplies. Nobody looks at you twice. You're a young artist buying linseed oil. This happens in every city with an art school. The second month, a gallery clerk who handles one of your pieces asks you a question, just making conversation. She says, "Where did you train?" You say, "Mostly self-taught." You smile. She smiles. The sale completes. You sit in your studio for several minutes afterward, brush in hand, not moving. The question was nothing, casual, meaningless. You know that, but your body doesn't know that. Your body treated it like an appraisal. You go home. You eat dinner. You watch television. You count $1,800 in cash from the past 2 weeks and fold it into a paint box under your sink because depositing your own forged income into a bank feels even to you like too much irony. By month 4, the gallery interactions stop feeling dangerous. You develop a professional detachment. These are objects. You are a craftsman. The fraud isn't yours. The risk feels borrowed, temporary, belonging to someone further up the chain than you. That's the lie. The first level tells you that the risk belongs to someone else. 6 months in, a man named Curtis, who does the same work for Hollis, gets caught. Not for the paintings, for talking. He told a girlfriend what he did in enough detail that she told a friend who told someone who told the wrong dealer. Curtis is facing fraud charges for work he thought was just copying. Hollis drops him without a phone call. No lawyer, no help, no acknowledgement that Curtis ever existed in his orbit. Hollis calls you the same afternoon Curtis is caught. He tells you to take 2 weeks off, stop everything, go somewhere, be visible somewhere that isn't here. You go to your aunt's place upstate and spend 14 days repainting her barn and thinking about Curtis. You think about the $300 a canvas. You think about the paint box under your sink, which now holds $7,600. You think about the word fraud and what it means under sentencing guidelines. You come back. You keep working because $7,600 is real and fraud is still abstract, and you are still somehow not thinking of yourself as a forger. That's the first level. You stay in it longer than you should because it's comfortable and the danger wears a very ordinary face. Level 2. The provenance. 3 years later, Hollis trusts you enough to explain the next part. You're sitting in the back room of the framing gallery on Brand Avenue, the one with the warped floorboards and the kettle that only makes weak tea. Hollis spreads a folder on the table. It's not a painting, it's a paper history. Receipts, letters, exhibition labels, auction stamps. He explains the problem with copying. It works, he says, but a painting without a past is just a suspicious object. The market doesn't buy pictures, it buys stories. The solution isn't a better forgery. The solution is a believable history. In other words, to give the object a documented life that a buyer and an expert can trace and verify. Your new role is building those histories. You learn to source genuine period paper, to mimic dead dealers' handwriting, to forge exhibition catalogues from galleries that closed decades ago. The documents are real objects. They have real age, real ink, real fading. They also describe events that never happened, attached to paintings that didn't exist until you made them. The technical term is provenance fabrication. You are mixing false history with verifiable detail until the false part becomes invisible. You learn archival research, not formally but practically. You learn what a legitimate ownership trail looks like on paper, and you learn how to make your forgeries fit that shape. You learn which dead collectors leave gaps in the record. You learn that experts authenticate consistency, not truth, so you keep everything consistent. A history that's too complete is a flag. A history that's perfectly clean is a flag. Real provenance is full of gaps. You build your gaps in specific, deliberate ways. You hire a researcher named Diane, who does not know what she's working on, and a documents man named Pruitt, who absolutely does. Pruitt charges 3 times what Diane does and communicates exclusively through a middleman. He never meets with you directly. He receives requests and returns materials. His fingerprints are never on the paintings, and neither technically are yours. You're a restorer, a small art consultant. You work hard, and you keep irregular hours, and your hands smell like solvent and old paper. Maya, the woman you've been seeing for 8 months, thinks you're a dealer. You let her think that because it's close enough to true to maintain without effort. You handle art. The art generates income. The income pays your rent and her birthday dinners and the weekend trips to the coast that she photographs for her social media, with captions about supporting working artists. The restoration work is your favorite part of the operation. Not for any criminal reason. You genuinely like saving damaged canvases. You took on an apprentice named Theo, who has a gift for cleaning varnish that takes lines of clients on weekend afternoons. The studio would be profitable without the forgeries. You think about that sometimes. You think about what it would mean to just restore real paintings and leave the rest behind. But the rest is where the money is, the real money. And you're good at this part, the history part, the thinking part, the part where you see how belief is built and understand how to make it convincing. Hollis promotes you. That's how he phrases it, a promotion. You're now building histories for 2 other people in Hollis's network. People whose names you don't know, whose faces you've never seen, whose canvases arrive wrapped in brown paper, left at a storage unit off the freeway every Tuesday. You start making real money, not copy money. Your percentage of the authentication fee, paid in cash, run through your own consulting work, invoiced, legitimate, clean. You are forging the paperwork for your own forgeries. The recursion of it would be funny if it weren't the sort of thing that adds years to a fraud sentence. Year 2. At this level, a regional auction house sends a routine query about a painting's exhibition history. Not an investigation, a letter, a question about a specific catalog citation that didn't quite match their records. Pruitt handles it through the middleman. The response is thorough, documented, and completely satisfying. The auction house closes the query in 6 weeks. You lose 4 pounds from stress during those 6 weeks and gain them back the day the letter arrives, confirming the sale stands. You celebrate by taking Maya to a restaurant that costs $400 for 2 people. You pay cash. The waiter doesn't notice. Nobody notices. That's what you've learned to do. Move through the world without edges that catch on anything. You start to understand that the actual painting is almost secondary to the story around it. Anyone can copy a canvas. The skill, the rare and difficult skill, is in making the world believe in it. You are the history. You are the part the whole enterprise cannot function without. That thought, the indispensability of yourself, is the first dangerous idea you've had in years. Level 3, the master. You're 31 and Hollis is gone. Not arrested, not dead, just gone. The way smart people exit this business when they feel the air changing. He called you one morning from a number you didn't recognize, told you the operation was yours to run and maintain, and hung up before you could ask questions. 2 weeks later, you heard he was in Italy, a rumor, unconfirmed, but consistent with what you knew about how Hollis planned things. He left you the network, the galleries, the contacts, the relationships with the people whose canvases arrive at the storage unit. He left you because you were the only person in his operation who understood the entire craft. You spend the first month being terrified, then you spend a month being practical, then you start building. The copies and the histories were simple instruments. What you design now is a body of work. You establish a method over 18 months. You stop copying known painters entirely. Instead, you invent lost ones, artists who plausibly existed in the margins of real movements, whose rediscovery feels like a gift to the market rather than a threat to it. You commission genuine scientific analysis of your own pigments, knowing they'll pass because you ground them yourself from period materials. You place small, authentic works in legitimate estate sales, building reputations for painters who never lived, so that when the major canvas appears, the name already carries weight. Each painting is convincing. Each painting serves a secondary function, anchoring a fabricated career that makes the next one easier to sell. The work enters the market as discovery and exits as documented art history that can be cited, exhibited, insured, inherited. You hire 3 people who know exactly what they're doing. You call them advisors. They counsel on materials, on aging techniques, on the auction houses and private dealers whose appetite for rediscovery outpaces their caution. One of them is a former museum conservator. He left left institutional work for private consulting and will not discuss his reasons. His fee is substantial. His knowledge is immeasurable. The clients you work for are diverse now, not just Hollis's former network. Referrals have arrived through channels you didn't solicit. People who move art in other cities. People whose business you don't want to know about and don't ask about. You are a service provider, a professional, an extremely specialized authority for paintings that were never painted by who you say. Maya finds an invoice in a coat pocket. The figure is large. She asks you about it at dinner, in the measured tone of someone who has been rehearsing the question. You explain the rediscovered painter, the estate, the scientific analysis, the legitimate exhibition trail. Everything you tell her is technically true. She knows it's incomplete. She accepts it anyway, because the life you've built around the truth is comfortable, and she loves you. And some questions are easier to leave half-answered. You tell yourself you're protecting her. That's partially true. You're also protecting the work because a partner who knows too much is a liability. And a partner who becomes a former partner knowing too much is a catastrophe. The fraud unit of a major auction house opens an internal review that you will learn years later is tangentially related to one of your clients, not you. An analyst there pulls sales records across several rediscovered estates, looking for patterns in pigment and provenance. Your invented painter appears in the data. He appears legitimate because, on paper, he is, but his name appears twice in flagged transaction clusters. And an analyst with nothing but time and a database starts building a chart. You don't know this yet. You find out later, much later, the way you find out most things about your own life. After the fact, in a document someone else assembled, you keep building. The work becomes more sophisticated. International elements. A dealer in a country with loose export rules. Canvases that move in ways that are technically legal in the country they leave, and technically legal in the country they arrive in, and thoroughly obscured in the space between. You're not stealing from anyone directly. You've built a philosophy around that distinction that lets you sleep. Buyers wanted beauty. You made beauty. The conservator gets questioned. Routine. Your former museum man prepares the answers. They're impeccable. The matter closes. You spend 3 weeks unable to paint and then return to yourself. You think about the exit. You have enough. Technically, numerically, definitively enough. The legitimate restoration business alone, the genuinely clean part, represents a net worth that most people retire on. You could stop. Legitimize everything remaining. Close the client relationships. Let the work go dormant and then disappear. You don't stop because the craft has become the point. The money is secondary to the elegance of the deception. You are the best at this that you have ever met, and the work satisfies something that has no name. You are an artist who cannot stop making art even when the gallery is full. That's what Hollis would have warned you about if he'd stayed long enough. Not the auction houses, the art. Level 4. The Ghost. You're 38, and you don't exist in the ways that matter. Your name is on nothing. A network of front dealers, attorneys, and registered companies holds every gallery, every storage unit, every account. On paper, you are a man of modest means, with a thin history and no remarkable sales. In practice, you oversee the creation and placement of paintings worth between $4 and $7 million a year across a market that spans 3 continents. You travel a lot. Geneva, Hong Kong, London, Vienna, cities that mean specific things to people who move art for a living. You meet people in hotel lobbies and auction previews, and once on a yacht in the Mediterranean that belongs to someone whose name you never learned. You are always well-dressed. You always order good wine. You always listen more than you speak. These are professional disciplines. Maya is gone. Not dramatically, gradually. Over 2 years of conversations that circled something she couldn't name and you wouldn't confirm. She assembled enough of the picture that the picture became unbearable. She left on a Tuesday with 3 suitcases and her dog, and a composure that told you she'd made the decision weeks before she executed it. She didn't threaten you. She didn't go to anyone. She understood. You have a lawyer in Zurich, a dealer in London, an authenticator in Singapore, and a fixer in New York who handles problems in this hemisphere that require physical presence. You have people in each city who are not friends but are something adjacent. The investigation you don't know about has a name now. It has a team. It has a wall with a diagram on it. Your name is not on the wall. A question mark is on the wall where your name will eventually go. The analyst who started it got promoted. Her replacement is less intuitive but more systematic. He runs the sales data through newer methods. The question mark on the wall acquires a shape. You are in Hong Kong when your New York fixer calls you on a phone you replace every 6 weeks. He tells you one of the client networks has been compromised. Investigation, multiple seizures, cooperation likely. You've built firewalls for this. You designed the method specifically so that any single exposure can be contained. The client doesn't know your name. They know a contact who knows a contact. The chain is long and deliberately so. You spend 72 hours executing a contingency you designed 3 years ago. Galleries close, inventories scatter. One front company dissolves, and another, dormant for 2 years, activates in a different country. The paintings move, the trail shifts. By the time any cooperation could theoretically point in your direction, the thing being pointed at no longer exists in the form anyone knew it. You are in Singapore when your Zurich lawyer sends a message through a secure channel. The message is 4 words. He says, "The weather is changing." You've had a protocol for this since level 3. You initiate it. Over the next 4 months, you systematically close operations. Not quickly, not obviously, not in a way that creates a pattern. Slowly, professionally, the way a conservator closes a restoration, 1 layer at a time. Clients are referred elsewhere. Associates are paid their final percentages and given no forwarding information. The work is dismantled from the outside in, leaving the core intact while the visible surfaces disappear. By month 5, you are left with what was always the exit. The legitimate restoration holdings, the real gallery, a carefully structured investment portfolio that represents a decade of cleaned earnings, fully integrated into the legal economy. The paper trail supporting these assets is deep, documented, and survives scrutiny because it was built to survive scrutiny from the first canvas. You're worth legitimately and documentably $8 million. You buy a house in a country with a favorable residency program and a strong tradition of financial privacy. Not to hide, to stop. You are done hiding. You are simply stopping. You sit on a terrace overlooking water and drink coffee and watch boats and feel something you haven't felt since your 20s. Stillness, the absence of the mind's hum. The quiet where the deceptions used to be. It lasts for months. Level 5, the reckoning. The indictment comes on a Thursday. You're in your terrace house when your Zurich lawyer calls. Not through a secure channel, just his voice on a phone. Because the time for operational security has passed, and what remains is the human version of the conversation. He tells you the case. Fraud, conspiracy to commit forgery, conspiracy to deal in misrepresented property, additional counts attaching your work to 2 client networks now fully cooperating. The cooperating witnesses include one of your former associates who knew less than he thought, but more than enough. The forensics attach your name to the question mark that has been on the wall for 6 years. The method held. The method always held. What didn't hold was a single associate who, facing his own exposure, traded what he knew for what he needed. You designed against this. You reduced the blast radius as much as any single human could. But you cannot design against human nature, and you knew that and built anyway. Your lawyer tells you your options. Extradition is theoretically possible, but practically slow. You could remain where you are for a period measured in years while legal processes proceed. You could also return voluntarily. You return voluntarily, not because you're noble, because you're 44 years old and you've been calculating exits for 20 years. And this is the only remaining move that preserves any agency over how the next chapter begins. The plea negotiations take 8 months. Your lawyer is expensive and exceptional. The case is strong on conspiracy and somewhat circumstantial on direct creation. You don't cooperate against the clients, not out of loyalty, because the clients are more dangerous than the prosecutors, and the prosecutors can only imprison you while the clients can do other things. You are sentenced to 14 years. You will serve just under 12. The $8 million in legitimate assets is largely forfeit. What your lawyers successfully argued to protect is modest enough to exist on after release, not enough to rebuild anything like the life you had. The restoration studio survives in a form. Theo kept it running through the entire proceeding. He owns it now, or a large portion of it. Your lawyer structured that during the negotiation that was important to you in a way you couldn't fully articulate. Prison at 44 is not prison at 24. Your body registers every indignity. Your mind, trained for 2 decades in sophisticated craft, has nothing to work on and turns inward in ways that are not comfortable. You sleep badly for the first year. You read everything. Biographies of people who built things and lost them and built different things. You teach an art class to other inmates in year 2, not as penance, though it functions that way. Because the work keeps the mind from going soft. Because men who learn to see proportion and light have slightly better odds at the thing that comes after this. The class is popular. The warden approves it because it looks like rehabilitation, and it might actually be rehabilitation. You are not sure yet. Your daughter. You have a daughter. She's 12 when you're sentenced. You didn't raise her. Her mother, a woman you were with briefly at level 2, handled that entirely and well. She writes 3 letters, brief, careful. The letters of a person trying to establish whether someone is worth knowing. You write back each time with more care than you've given anything. Her 4th letter arrives in year 6. It's longer. She's 18 now. She asks why, not emotionally, analytically. She wants to understand the logic that produced your choices. You spend 2 weeks writing the response. You explain the craft, the way each level felt, like a professional advancement, like applying real skill to real problems. You explain what got lost at each transition. The distance between what you told yourself and what was true. She writes back in 3 weeks. She says, I'm studying art history. I want to understand how authenticity is decided. Year 9. You get a letter from a former client, not about business, just a letter. He's out, he's somewhere, he's doing something he doesn't describe. He says he heard you ran the art class. He says that's funny. You agree in your response that it is somewhat funny. Year 11, your daughter visits. She's 23. She has your eyes and her mother's composure and a graduate degree in cultural heritage protection. She works for an organization you spent 20 years designing against. The symmetry is not lost on either of you. You sit across from each other, and she asks questions like someone who has been preparing for this conversation for years. You answer everything. Some of it is the first time you've said it aloud. Some of it, hearing it in your own voice, sounds different than it did as thought. She comes back the next month and the month after. You're released at 56. Parole conditions are standard. You report weekly. You cannot work in the art trade, which covers roughly everything you know how to do. You cannot associate with known criminals, which covers roughly everyone you knew. Your parole officer is young enough to be your child. She is thorough and fair and unimpressed by you specifically, which you find oddly comforting. Your daughter comes to see you in your small apartment 6 months after release. She brings food. She sits at your kitchen table and eats, and you eat. And you talk about her work, which involves identifying fakes in museum collections before they're acquired. She asks if you miss it. You think about the terrace with the view of the water. You think about the Geneva lobbies and the London dealer and the New York fixer. You think about the craft, the beauty of a painting that fooled the world. You tell her the thinking, yes, the work itself, not the fraud of it, but the challenge of making something so convincing it became real to everyone who saw it. You miss that. You tell her the rest of it, the life it cost, the years, the distance between you, the version of yourself that became so embedded in the deception that you mistook the deception for a life. You don't miss that part at all. She nods. She files this away the way she files everything, precisely. She stays for 3 hours. When she leaves, she hugs you, which she has not done before. It's brief, practiced, the hug of someone who is still deciding how much this costs her. You understand that calculation entirely. You spent your career making those calculations. The only difference is this one matters. You go back to the kitchen table after she leaves. The apartment is quiet. You make coffee. You sit. You think about authenticity, how it's built, how it fails, how the failure is almost always designed in from the beginning, a structural assumption that turns out to be wrong, a single belief that was never as solid as the experts claimed. You think about what you would tell the 24-year-old copying landscapes in a rented studio and calling himself a student. You think about the exact words you would use. Then you think about whether he would listen. You already know the answer. You lived it. The coffee goes cold. The apartment stays quiet. Outside, the city moves through its ordinary judgments, art changing hands in ways that are mostly genuine, mostly documented, mostly visible to the experts paid to see them. You built a career on the space between mostly and entirely. That space is smaller now than it was when you started. The science got better, the databases got smarter, the question marks on investigation walls acquire names faster than they used to. Somewhere right now, a 24-year-old is matching a dead painter's brushwork and calling himself a copyist and thinking the risk belongs to someone else. You drink the cold coffee. You don't try to find him. Some things you can't stop from the outside. Some things a person has to run all the way to the end of before they understand where the end is. You understand where the end is. You're sitting in it. That should be enough. Most days, it is.